BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, I'm Thomas Duncan, and this is the Scottish Football Podcast. All the news, views and analysis you need. It's Wednesday the 13th of November, and here's what's coming up.
Perisic controls on the right-hand side, facing Robertson. Drops the shoulder, fires the ball to the left-hand side. The shot saved by Suzanne. Kramaric will head home on the rebound.
With Croatia coming to town, we turn our attention to the men's national team. Also,
Lennon Miller, chance to make it two. Lennon Miller at the double for Motherwell. The teenage sensation with an absolutely fabulous finish.
what more can be done to promote young Scottish talent? And
for me personally, I think the last time I played in the Champions League in Scotland was playing for City against Chelsea. Now I'm coming back playing for Chelsea against Celtic, so it's kind of like a full circle moment for me as well.
Can Women's Champions League debutant Celtic upset former finalist Chelsea and their homecoming star Erin Cuthbert?
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Sport Scotland.
Right, I'm joined by two people who are absolutely delighted that there's a third international break in 3 months. Scott McDermott, the chief football writer for the Sunday Mail, and Suzanne Lappin, former Scotland international, who also played for both Celtic and Chelsea. How are we doing, guys?
Yeah, good thanks.
Thomas.
Good. Right, let's fire away. Lots to discuss with Scott and Suzanne. We'll also hear a bit from Chelsea's Erin Cuthbert. Before all that, let's quickly run through the latest Scottish football headlines. Under pressure, Hibs manager David Gray has been given the backing of the club's boards, with Easter Road Club sitting rock bottom of the Premiership table. Dundee Chief Executive John Nelms has revealed the club are keen to explore playing an SPFL game in America. Ayr United were booed off the pitch as Scott Brown's side were knocked out of the Challenge Cup by 5th tier East Kilbride. And League 2 side Bonnyrigg Rose have been handed a 6-point penalty in League 2 due to the slope of their pitch. Right, let's start with the men's national team. Croatia in town on Friday, followed by a trip to Poland to conclude the Nations League campaign at the start of next week. No competitive win for over a year. I feel, Scott, like the mood around the national team has been kind of fixed for the last couple of months in terms of positivity around some of the performances against elite opposition, but no win. How important is it that that changes in this international break before we come back in the new year for the World Cup campaign?
Yeah, listen, I think Steve Clarke definitely needs a win. There's no doubt about that. We're kind of fed up rhyming off this stat about the kind of winless run. But I think you're right. I think the kind of feel good factor came back during the last international break with both with the performance in Croatia, despite the narrow defeat. Obviously, we're really unlucky not to get a point in Zagreb that night. They get the late goal chalked off right at the death. I was in Zagreb for the game, and it was agonising for them because they'd put in a really good performance. And then, of course, Portugal at Hampden, I think, was the night where a lot of fans really got back on side with Steve Clarke and this team. I think there is a bit of positivity now. I think people can see a kind of brighter future. They're looking ahead to the World Cup qualifiers, and I think a big part of that's probably seeing younger guys, especially Ben Doak, obviously coming into the squad, doing really well. He was terrific in Croatia and then in the Portugal game. So, no, listen, it's been a disappointing run. But I think Friday night, home to Croatia, gives them a real opportunity to go and get that win that they crave.
Yeah, we'll touch on Ben Doak and younger players later on because it's a good point. Suzanne, do you think the players are carrying the burden of this kind of no competitive win? Do you think the players are talking about it? Are they feeling it? Or can you take the positives from that goalless draw the last time against Portugal and start afresh almost in this camp?
I think as a footballer, you've got to just sort of try and move on and put the sort of results to one side. Of course, they'll be aware of it. I think they'll know that, like Scott said, they were unlucky
away from home against Croatia, and then obviously at home to Hampden. It was a really, really strong performance competing against Portugal and getting the draw. So I think they'll know that they've got the capability to go there on Friday night and really cause, at home to Hampden Friday night, everybody loves a nighttime game, it's just got a different feel to it. I think they'll hopefully be confident they can get something from the game. I think they'll be naturally, buoyed by the return of, some key players. You look at the likes of John McGinn, he's massive. He's one of Scotland's main players. I read the other day it was something like 2021 since he wasn't last in the squad before that. So he's such a big player, such an impact player. I think for me the sort of defence and midfield almost can pick itself. The likes of Gilmore and McTominay, doing really, really well over in Italy. So I think we're really strong there. I think for me the question is up front and who does Steve Clarke go with, because naturally you would think it would be Lyndon Dykes, but he's not exactly in top goal scoring form. And for me, when it comes to scoring goals, you're looking for that person in form. So I think he'll be disappointed that Che Adams, who was starting to perform well, can't make it this time as well.
Yeah, it's an excellent point, Scott, Suzanne makes here about who's playing up front. That probably seems like the big question at the moment, because naturally it might be Lyndon Dykes for his experience. Steve Clarke trusts him. Then Lawrence Shankland as well. He's used him at times. But between them, they've got 1 goal, I think, this season. 2 goal, 1 goal each this season. Tommy Conway has got 5 and 12. Looks to be a player playing with confidence. He's got real pace and athleticism. So that's a big call for Steve Clarke on Friday night. What would you do?
It's an interesting one. It feels like it was, up until a few years ago, it was a kind of perennial problem for Scotland, getting a striker that was in form, scoring goals, and we felt Che Adams had kind of solved that problem. He's obviously injured. As Suzanne said, it's a real blow because he'd started really well at Torino. You wanted him to come into the international camp and keep that going. You're right. I think Steve Clarke's natural instinct would be to go with Dykes. He's not a natural goal scorer, but we all know what he kind of gives the team in terms of being that focal point up front, in terms of his work rate. I think he probably will go with Lyndon Dykes. I think history probably tells us that. Lawrence Shankland is obviously going through a really kind of barren spell in front of goal, but I've been at Hearts last couple of games, and the strange thing, he's actually played really well. His link-up play and stuff outside the box has been really tidy, really impressive. He just can't find that goal. And Conway is an interesting one because, a bit like Doak, he brings a freshness, he brings an energy. He has been in decent form for Middlesbrough. We spoke to him last week, and he's really... he's enjoying life at Middlesbrough. It's been a great move for him so far. I think he would bring something different. Personally, I'd be tempted to go with somebody like Conway to see what they can do. But I've got a feeling, knowing Steve Clarke, he'll probably just go with his instinct and go with Dykes.
You were nodding there when Scott was talking about playing Conway, Suzanne. Do you agree? Would that be something you'd like to see?
Yeah, for me, I think the benefit of the national team is you get to pick the players that are in form, right? When it's at club level, you've got a set pool of players, and whether they're in form or not, you sometimes need to go with them. I think that's the benefit of the national team. For me, I would always pick, particularly in that area, players whose confidence is high and they're scoring goals. But I do agree with Scott. I think Steve Clarke will tend to go with tried and trusted, which is Lyndon Dykes. But for me, I would absolutely go with Conway. I think as well, it just naturally brings the energy that Scott was mentioning, and I think as fans as well, almost an excitement to see him from the start and see what he can do.
Yeah, and a real positive has to be the form of Scott McTominay as well. And you mentioned John McGinn coming back, which is massive in terms of on the pitch and off it as well. But Scott McTominay, scored again for Napoli against Inter Milan at the weekend. He's becoming a bit of a superstar almost, and we know what he's done in a Scotland jersey. But it's great to see him, almost get out of the troubled club that is Manchester United and really, start to do something special over in Italy under Antonio Conte?
Yeah, I mean, I was reading last week that the fans in Naples have really taken them to their hearts already. I mean, they're asking the question, why Manchester United let this guy go, which is great from our point of view. We know what the fans are like in Naples, so to be doing so well over there, becoming a favourite already, is testament to him. And you're right, I mean, just seeing how brilliant is it for us, putting the TV on Saturday night or Sunday, whenever the game was, and seeing Scott McTominay and Billy Gilmour at the San Siro running a midfield for a top Serie A side. It's early days, but it feels like that move has been absolutely brilliant for both of them. I remember being in Portugal not so long ago for the Nations League game when we lost over there, and Roberto Martinez spoke before the game saying, well, he felt McTominay and Gilmour, players like that, going to Serie A and going to challenge themselves and playing in that league regularly would only benefit the national team, and I tend to agree. Suzanne said earlier, midfield is such an important part of the team for us because we've got real quality in there, guys playing at the top level. I mean, it's so hard for other midfielders to get in. Somebody like Lewis Ferguson, for instance, who is obviously just coming back from injury just now at Bologna, but he was the best midfielder. He voted the best midfielder in Italy last year, but he was struggling to get in our midfield. I think that shows the strength we've got in there. And as you say, it feels like McTominay and Gilmour, while they're playing every week at Napoli, then they're absolute shoo-ins to get picked for Scotland.
Well, one man who's not in the senior squad, despite many calling for his inclusion, is Motherwell's 18-year-old midfielder Lennon Miller. He'll play for the under-19s against Wales. Instead, Suzanne, I think Steve Clarke was basically saying, we don't want to put too much pressure on Lennon Miller. It is a strong area of the field, as Scott has just touched on as well. So, it's probably the hardest area, or is the hardest area to get into the Scotland squad. Would you like to have seen him included, or is it better for him that he's kind of managed accordingly to try and, dampen down some of the hype that's building?
Yeah, it's a hard one, isn't it? If I reflect on the women's game, quite a lot of senior players. If you look at like Kim Little, before that, the Joe Loves at this day, they were in the squads from 16, even myself, getting opportunities from a young age. Maybe that was because we didn't have so many players to choose from. But I think as a player, you do want opportunities, don't you? You want to go and see, you want to go and experience it and feel what it's like. Even if you don't go on the pitch, I think inclusion can just be enough to give you that spark and sight of what's to come. I can understand it as well. The amount of games, the volume of games, when players are still young, you have that nervousness around, are you going to burn someone out before they really get to their peak? But I think if you look at the SPL in the Scottish game, he is a standout. He's a standout week in, week out for Motherwell. I get, we are strong in that area, but he's just, captained his side at a semi-final at Hampden. I think if we look at our own league, which, I know we'll maybe focus on later, but if you focus on our own league, he is one of the outstanding Scottish talents. So for me, if I look at around that midfield, I think he probably could have edged a place over a number of others. And he might personally be feeling disappointed, but I think, hopefully Steve Clarke is managing that, as he said, and, chatting to him and keeping him informed as to why he's not been included.
I agree with Suzanne, Thomas, in terms of, I understand where Steve Clarke's coming from, but I too think he should have been involved in this squad, Lennon Miller. I just think exposing him to that environment at a young age would have done him the world of good. Just bringing him in, having a look at him, having the other players can have a look at him in training as well, letting the boy know himself the kind of standard, obviously, that he's got to get to. There's no many friendly games in international football now, so you don't really get many opportunities, to blood these guys. It's like we were saying with Tommy Conway earlier. So I think Lennon Miller's done enough to have merited a place in this squad. I think it's
so Scott,
to get him in.
Having said that, obviously Ben Doak's been given a run as a teenager. He's done really well, so I don't want to go too overboard. But is it a cultural thing for us that we need to get over? We know we've had this Scottish FA report about the absolute paucity of under-21s from Scotland getting a game in our top flight. We'll see whether anything changes on the back of that, but it's still early days. But do we just not have enough belief in our young players to throw them into situations?
Yeah, I think you're right. I do think it's a cultural problem. There does seem to be a fear there about throwing young players in early. Listen, I think young players need two things. The first one's a given, and that's talent. The second one isn't, and that's opportunity. I think Suzanne used that word earlier on. These boys need a chance to play in first teams. I spoke to a guy a couple of weeks ago, young Scottish coach called Cameron Campbell, who's out at RB Leipzig now working in their academy. And he kind of banging on about young players getting that opportunity. But I think he did a study recently of they looked at the 100 best players in Europe, kind of through UEFA, the 100 top players, and 97 of those players were playing in a first team before the age of 19, and most of them had been exposed to a kind of first team environment from the age of 16. I don't think it's any coincidence that these players have gone on to be to be in the top 100 players in Europe. They need a chance, they need an opportunity to play. If I think I'm right in saying that a few years ago in Motherwell's academy, Lennon Miller played alongside Bailey Rice, who's at Rangers currently. I think if you ask most people at that time, a few years ago, Bailey Rice was on a par, if not maybe even better than Lennon Miller in the youth teams. But look at the two of them now, the progress they've made. Lennon Miller's got maybe 50 first team games under his belt. We're talking about him potentially getting into a Scotland squad. Whereas Bailey Rice, who's been in and around the Rangers first team, but has never quite had an opportunity, it feels like he's playing catch up now. So, yeah, talent and opportunity. I think the talent is there. I don't buy the theory that Scotland don't produce talented young players anymore, but I don't think enough opportunities there for them to go and progress the way they should.
Yeah, we could do about 10 podcasts on this issue. We'll have more on it. In Thursday's podcast, we'll be speaking to Scotland Under-19's head coach, Neil McFarlane. Finally, it's a big night for Celtic women's team who take on Chelsea in the Champions League. They've lost their first two group matches to FC Twente and Real Madrid. Suzanne, what have you made of it so far? I've watched both the games. I thought Twente was a big disappointment at home in their most winnable game, but then 4-0 against Real Madrid away seemed actually pretty harsh. They played pretty well. So is that a fair assessment, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's I think the same as you. I think Twente at home was probably their best opportunity in terms of getting points on the board, and I think overall the performance on the night, I think they would be disappointed because I think they had chances, and then poor defending cost them the goals that eventually they lost the match. I think if you look at Real Madrid, there was certainly improvement. I think they'd got used to the level because it is a significant step up. When I was at the Champions League with Glasgow City, it was so noticeable, the difference in the levels you had to go to from where you were playing week in, week out. I think, Kelly Clark touched on it yesterday that, you get to know your opponents very well in this league because you play them so many times, but that sort of unknown factor they went into at 20. I think Real Madrid, they made a good account of themselves. I think, 4-0, it's not a positive result, but I think, potentially might have fared worse than that going into that game off the back of the 20 game. I think, tonight's going to be such a tough ask. You've got a Chelsea team who haven't lost, coming in such great form, new manager who's came in, and it's almost seems like a seamless transition after, so long with Emma Hayes and the success. They just look as if they've, clicked into gear under Sonia. They're playing with a real flown football within their team. You know, so many different goal scorers. You look throughout their team, you know, they're littered with high talent. You know, it's a huge ask for Celtic tonight, but a huge opportunity as well. You know, the game at Celtic Park, for the women's game in this country, for young girls, you know, an opportunity that I would never have had to go and see that level of football as a young girl, or, you know, even young boy as well. You want as many people to get along and see it, but it'll be a difficult night for Celtic, that's for sure.
Well, Scotland and Chelsea midfielder Erin Cuthbert has been in conversation with Leanne Crichton and Rachel Corsie on our sister podcast Behind the Goals ahead of the match.
I'm expecting a tough game. I'm expecting a team that would have a lot of energy. You know, first 20 minutes are going to impose themselves. I certainly know that when I was in Glasgow, when I was playing for Glasgow City, when Chelsea were coming to town, we wanted to show how good we could be against the best, and you wanted to, you know, put your best foot forward. So I'm sure they'll be doing that and be really excited. And for me personally, like, I think the last time I played in the Champions League in Scotland was playing for City against Chelsea. Now I'm coming back playing for Chelsea against Celtic. So it's kind of like a full circle moment for me as well. Every year we still set the same target. We want to go all the way. But for me, on a personal point of view, I think we just need to take each game as it comes, and we need to get out the group, because there's years gone by where we start talking about the Champions League and we don't even get out the group. You know, I remember Wolfsburg away, and I remember the feeling after Christmas that when, you know, watching all the other teams in the latter rounds of the Champions League and knowing that it should have really been us, and we did mess it up. So I think for us, it is literally just focusing on getting out the group, like the next task. But yeah, do we want to go all the way? Absolutely.
Right, Erin Cuthbert there, and you can hear more from her in the build-up to Celtic against Chelsea in the Women's Champions League on the latest episode of Behind the Goals on BBC Sounds. Right, Suzanne, just finally, how do you see this game going? It's difficult to see anything other than a Chelsea victory, but I suppose without being too negative about it, it's all about the performance and can you keep the score down, which I'm sure the players won't have that attitude, but you know, it's difficult for us to say anything different given the gulf in class and resources and everything that you mentioned.
Yeah, I think, you know, as you say, it's difficult to see anything other than a Chelsea victory, but, you know, let's hope, you know, nights of Champions League at Celtic Park, you know, they're famous in the men's side. Let's hope that, you know, the Celtic women's team can get a huge crowd, you know, that will make a difference to the levels. So you're just hoping that they can compete, they can give a good account of themselves, and, you know, hopefully, you know, the score is not a very high score and reflects badly on, you know, our game in Celtic in that sense. But I think, you know, hopefully they'll go and do a good account of themselves.
Yeah, I'm sure Erin Cuthbert will be keen to score at Celtic Park in a blue jersey, but given she's a Rangers fan and all our family are as well. But yeah, we'll see if she can do that tonight. Thanks very much, guys. That's all we've got time for. Thanks to Suzanne, Lappin and Scott McDermott. Thank you for listening. You can hear live commentary of Celtic against Chelsea in the Women's Champions League tonight on BBC Radio Scotland Extra with Sports Sound on air from 7 o'clock. And remember, we're here with new episodes of the Scottish Football Podcast bright and early every day, so make sure you don't miss out by subscribing on BBC Sounds and have push notifications turned on in your phone. Until next time, it's goodbye for now.
This is the shocking moment English football has been dreading.
My name is Moses Swabu, and I used to be a professional footballer, but then I got in deep with organised crime and became a match fixer operating in the English League.
A match-fixing investigator has highlighted 2 matches he says appear to have suspicious betting patterns.
How honest are you going to be with me?
This is 100%. Join me for Sports Strangers Crimes presents Confessions of a Match Fixer. Listen on BBC Sounds.